You're listening to Weather with Enthusiasm. Chicago historical records from the year 2020. A couple of amazing things that I came across over the past couple of days. I'll share some of them on this little recording here. One of them is very, very fascinating to me. And I actually took a photo of it, and a lot of photos of it actually, of going back from the National Weather Service, going back into the weather records for Chicago, looking at weather extremes. And I'm just amazed at how old these records are. It's something that I just don't think you'll see in other cities. And I actually checked it out. In St. Louis, the records don't go back to all those records have been broken by now. But here in Chicago, you have like the largest temperature drop within 1 hour. It was 30 degrees. So 30 degrees isn't anything that spectacular, I think, because we have a lake over here. And of course, but it happened in 1908. It was March 26, 1908. It was 71 degrees at 2 p.m. and 41 degrees at 3 p.m. And then if you look at all the biggest range in a single calendar day, the high and low temperatures ranged, it happened four times. It ranged between 49 to 52 degrees. All of them took place over 110 years ago. The most recent one, which is also the biggest, was 1900. February 8th, 52 degree difference. It went from 62 to 10, or maybe it went from 10 to 62. There's no way to know. And then the others were all, the next one, February 21st, 1873. The next one, 1888. And the next one, 1895. And so that one was 80 degrees and 31 degrees. And so far, everything we've mentioned, we've mentioned 5 records. All of them are back. All of them are from over 110 years ago. Now you go to, here's another major record, the quickest temperature drop. Went from 82 to 55 degrees. That's 27 degrees in 10 minutes. And then the temperature fell to 32 by 4 a.m. That happened in 1936. In 1938, another major drop from 45 degrees to 0 within 24 hours. And then there was a 22 degree temperature drop in 150 seconds, and that happened in 1963. Temperature went from 84 to 62. So 1963 is the latest that we've seen so far, but most of them are before the year 1910, really. And then when you get into the largest temperature change from one day to the next, almost all of these are all the temperature drops, with the exception of one. 3 out of 4 of them took place about at least 109 years ago. So we look at a drop of 61 degrees in 1911. That was November 11th to November 12th. It went from 74 to 13 degrees. And then again in 1901, it went from 49 degrees to 9 below 0. And then 1887, it went from 30 degrees. Then we go into the rises. The rise in temperature, the largest rise in temperature took place in 1887, where it went from 0 to 58 degrees. That's a 58 degree rise. That took place from February 13th to the 14th in 1887. Now we also saw a 58 degree rise again, which took place in 1972. That was March 10th through March 11th, where the temperature went from 15 to 73 degrees. And then to me, my favorite one happened in 1977 or 1986, with a rise of 56 degrees. The temperature went from 25 to 81 or 29 to 85. Both of them a 56 degree temperature rise, but over there you go from winter to summer. I find the ones which are going from cold to hot, the rise in temperatures to be the most amazing, because when temperatures drop, that's kind of normal. These cold fronts are sharp and they bring quickly dropping temperatures. Or you have the lake, that backdoor lake front, that the lake front, cold front thing, which also sharp drops in temperatures. But warm fronts are not that sharp, so to have these types of temperature rises is very magnificent, and it just amazes me how these records took place such a long time ago. I mean, we have the equivalent, but so far the latest 1977. Now there is a record here, 1996, which I remember this happening. That was a drop of 57 degrees, but that's 1996, January 18th. It went from 61 degrees to 4 degrees. But again, the largest drop of temperature was 61 degrees. That took place in 1911. The biggest rise of temperature took place in 1887 and again 1972. And so we're seeing these records really they took place a very, very long time ago. When you go into the longest period of below freezing weather, once again, we're looking at 1977, when it comes to winter records, 1977 and probably 1979 also are just always going to be on there because those winters were exceptionally cold. We had a couple winters this decade which were very, very cold, but most of these records are from, if we go back, we have one from 1870, 29 days happened in 1879, again in 1895, 28 days happened in 1905, and again in 1918. 33 days of below freezing was in 1985, and the record is 43 days in 1977. It ended February 8th, 1977. The longest consecutive number of hours below zero is 100 hours, which ended December 25th, 1983. The latest freeze of the season on record is November 24th, in 1931, and the last spring freeze of the season, the earliest date is March 19th, which took place in 1925, and the latest is May 25th in 1992. The first killing frost, the latest, is 1899, December 3rd, 1899, and the earliest was 1974. We have a lot of old records. The greatest number of days in a month with a minimum of 0 or less. Many of these three of them are from the 1800s. 4 of them. We have February 1875, 14 days, a minimum of 0 or less. January 1885, 12 days, and then January 1887 and 1888. Had 13 days. The record is 17 days, which was January 1977. The runner-up is January 1963. We also had 14 days, January 1979, and with the 13 days, it was also 1982, 1936, and 1912. So I've noticed that there are some 1930s, 1950s, 1980s. We haven't seen any 1950s yet, I don't think, but we're going to get to that. The greatest number of days during winter with temperatures below zero, those honors go to 1884 to 1885 with 25 days. Second in line is 1935 to 1936, the Dust Bowl years, and 1962 to 1963 with 24 days. 1981 to 1982, 22 days. And we said 1874 to 1875, 21 days. 1978 to 1979, 21 days. 1872 to 1873, 19 days. Now realize, anyways, winters without any zero or lower temperatures. 1881 to 1882. That was one of those years with no 0 degree temperatures. There was, the coldest temperature that year was 1. Another one, 1905 to 1906. 6 was the coldest that year. 1930 to 1931. 1931 to 1932. Again, those are years that the temperature never hit 0. 1936 to 1937. 1938 to 1939. Most of the 1930s, temperature never hit 0. 1955 to 1956. 1959 to 1960. And 1982 to 1983. All of those years the temperature never hit 0, and the most recent one is 2011 to 2012, where the coldest temperature was 5 degrees. And So those are the winters without any zero. By the years, it's 1906, 1921, 1931, 1937, 1939, 1956, 1964, and 2012. 2012 is going to make it on this list many, many times. The greatest consecutive, okay, there's a lot of records here, but this one, the year it stands out is 1912. The greatest consecutive number of days in each year with minimum temperature of 0 degrees or lower. The winner is 1912 with 10 days. And that happened 9 days as the runner-up in 1963. The greatest number of days, the lowest, the lowest daily mean temperatures recorded in Chicago. So we go a lot of 1800s over here again. 10 below zero. 1884, 1893, 1897, 1899, 1984. And the best one is 2019, January 30th. The mean temperature was 10 below zero. It's amazing whenever you can get a record low on here, considering the urban heat island effect. 11 below zero, 1888, 1885. And then the other years are more modern, 1905, 1963, 1983, 1994, 1996. 12 below zero, 1933, 1996. 13 below zero, 1977, 14 below zero, 1899, 1983, 15 below zero, 1879, 1982, 16 below zero, 1985 and 1994, and we already said the coldest. The lowest temperature recorded in Chicago was 16 below zero, and that happened 8 times. 3 out of the 8 took place in the 1800s. And then 4 out of the 8 took place before the year 1930. And there's really after 1966, it's only happened twice, where the temperature was 16 below zero. And that was in January 16th, 1994, and January 6th, 2014. The other times were in 1879, 1893, 1897, 1912, 1930, 1966. And then 17 below zero. There's a couple from the 1890s, and then from the 1930s, then a couple then one from the 1980s, one from the 1990s, one from the 1970s. 18 below zero, there's 5 from the 1800s, then one from 1905, and one from 1963, one from 1983. And 19 below zero, 2 from the 1970s, 1 from the 1980s, 1 from the 1990s. 20 below zero, 2 from the 1870s, 1 from the 1980s. 21 below zero, 2 of them from the 1800s, and then 1 from the 1980s, 1 from the 2 from the 1980s, 1 from the 1990s, 1 from 2019. January 31st, 2019, temperature was 21 below zero. And then January 30th, 2019, temperature was 23 below zero. That's the third coldest it's ever been in Chicago. We have 1872 as well. And 26 below zero is the coldest, which happened January 10th, 1982. Now, the greatest number of days with a maximum temperature of 90 degrees or higher, and these records also go way back. Greatest number of days in a month. So it looks like the record is going to be 18, which took place in August 1947, or 19 actually, July 1955 and July 1987, 16 in June 1954, 10 in May 1977, 8 in September 1959 and September 1991, and then 2 in October 1997, in October 1971, and April 1930. The least, okay, anyways, the greatest number of days with a maximum temperature of 90 degrees or higher. So we go back to 35 days in 1964, 1971, 36 days in 1954, 38 days in 1950. A lot from the 1950s. A lot from the 1950s. 4 of them are from the 1950s, and then we have 2 from the 1980s. 5 of them are from the 1950s, 2 from the 1980s, and then the most recent one is 46 days in 2012. But the record is 47 days, which took place in 1988. Normal is 14 days for O'Hare, Midway 15 days, and Northerly Island at the lake is 8 days. And the greatest consecutive number of days with a maximum temperature of 90 or higher was 11 days. That took place 4 times: 1953, 1954, 1955, and 1959. And then the runner-up is 10 days, which took place in 1973 and 1987. In terms of hundredths by decade, the winner is the 1980s, the runner-up is the 1940s, and then the runner-up to that is the 1910s and the 1950s, and after that is the 1990s, which is much less, down to 5. Only 4 from 2010 to 2019, only 2 in the 1880s and 1900 to 1909, and then only 1 from 2000 to 2009, and then 0 in the 1870s and the 1890s. The temperature, then it has all the occurrences when the temperature was 100 degrees or higher, and so that was very interesting stuff. I think that took us long enough. And then in St. Louis, by the way, things are a lot different, and you could really, the records generally are broken. All those old records are broken and replaced by newer records, and that was something very interesting that I thought I would share. And I'm signing off now.